This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest. You know him from episodes like Alien, Aliens, Die Hard, and John Wick, the CEO and founder of Westport Studios, and a proud member of the Five Timers Club, Robb Conlon.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate being here. It's always a good time to be on this. I look forward to it.
We also welcome back our other returning celebrity guest scorer. You know him from episodes like Get Out and Training Day, the founder of Boss Locks Media and host of the Working While Black show, Walter Gaynor.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. I'm trying to come for Robb's record. We'll see how it goes.
I have a rather boisterous crowd here tonight.
That would be a lot easier to do, Walt, if you weren't appearing on the same episode as Robb.
Kick him off.
So, gentlemen, how are we this evening? Been a long time.
Been a minute.
Yeah, it has been a minute. And, you were just talking about this in the pre-show. You said this episode's been 14 months in the making, which is kind of wild.
Walt hasn't been on since probably last February, and you haven't been on since we did our Dark Knight double in July. So, yeah, it's been a ways off when you both requested to be on this particular episode. I guess what I need to do more often is have Denzel action movies on the list to just lure you both back out.
Got no problems with that, man.
I'll always sign up for the...
Wow.
Drawing a blank.
This is what happens when you're 60.
I'm nowhere.
Okay.
What's the series he's doing now?
Denzel, the Equalizer?
The Equalizer. I'm always willing to sign up for the Equalizer.
I'm here for it.
I haven't seen any of them yet, but I know that was a favorite TV show of yours as a kid, so that would make sense.
It was in the 80s, so I was, in high school.
I thought it was like the 70s or the 60s, but okay.
Nope.
All right, my bad.
Some would say this movie is a prequel to The Last Equalizer, so...
Well, there you go. So tonight, as we've just now teased, for our 208th episode, we discuss one of the most beloved of Denzel action films with Man on Fire from 2004, celebrating its 20th anniversary this week. Directed by Tony Scott, written by Brian Helgeland, music by Harry Gregson Williams, starring Denzel Washington as John W. Creasy, Dakota Fanning as Guadalupe Lupita Pita Ramos. Way too many names there. Radha Mitchell as Lisa Ramos, Christopher Walken as Paul Rayburn, Mark Anthony as Samuel Ramos, Giancarlo Giannini as Miguel Manzano, Mickey Rourke as Jordan Kelfus, Rachel Ticotin, I think it is, Mariana Garcia Guerrero, Roberto Sosa as Daniel Sanchez, Jesus Ochoa as Victor Fuentes, Carmen Salinas as Guardian 3. I love it when the character names are just so descriptive right there. Jero Camillo as Aurelio Sanchez, Rosa Maria Hernandez as Maria Rosas Sanchez, Charles Paravente as Jersey Boy, and Mario Zaragoza as Jorge Gonzalez. Recognition for this movie, Man on Fire, a remake of the 1987 film, was released on April 23rd, 2004. On a budget of $60 to $70 million, the film would be number one at the box office upon release, eventually making over $130 million worldwide to become the number 40 grossing film of 2004. However, critics were not so kind to the film as it was almost universally deadpanned for its violence, vigilantism, shallow characters, and confusing plotline. Nevertheless, audiences love the film, giving it an A- cinema score, and the split between critics and audiences remains yet today. Man on Fire currently holds a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes among critics, a 47 score on Metacritic, and a 3.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, as we start every week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I had none. Had never seen it, nor had I ever even heard of it until it was on the schedule.
So, this is one for me that is a first time, but has been one I've been circling for quite a long time. And that's why I planned this out 14 months in advance for our two guests. Specifically because it had been a movie that Bill Simmons and The Ringer had talked about and done a full episode on the rewatchables previously. And so I was really hyped for going into this movie. I wanted to have an excuse to kind of watch it and have something productive around it. And so honestly, there are a lot of movies that I put on the schedule only so that I will get to them myself and have a reason to getting to them. This was one of those. So, since both of our two guests requested to be on this episode, I have to assume that you both have close personal relationships with this movie and have seen it at least once, if not multiple times. Robb, you tend to be our action star guy who comes on for a lot of our action projects. What is your relationship?
So this is one that the wife and I throw in every once in a while, just because I think it's reflected in kind of the critic and the Metacritic scores of is it a tour de force? Is it Citizen Kane? No. But is it a great story that people can agree with and see themselves and see other people they know in characters? I think that's absolutely yes, that people can see parts of themselves in there. People who are dads, people who are moms, people who are uncles, things like that. And that this movie for me is one. My sister has a daughter who looks incredibly like Dakota Fanning did as she plays Peter Ramos. And every time I see this movie now that she has grown up a little bit into that 7-8-year-old range, I just always think of her and just always thinking of how I can make sure that she is always safe and happy and healthy and things like that. So this is a very important movie to me for that. But also it's one where I think that it shows that even though we love, people have problems, like John Creasy is a flawed character. And I think that even as much as you want to pull for him and things like that, I think that even the people that we look up to and the people that we like to follow in life can have those problems. And I think that it addresses that pretty head on, because I know for me at one point in time, there were some problems that I had in my life that were not quite reminiscent of John's, but in a point, as I sit here sipping a Buffalo Trace, at a younger, dumber me could have had some real problems with that, and seeing what that does to somebody, I think is really interesting.
We certainly don't criticize for anyone who indulges in the brown liquor around here on this particular podcast.
Was that supposed to be some sort of comment about me?
Given that we've often called it dad juice on this particular program.
Dad juice.
Yes.
I call it dad juice every once in a while. I don't even have any kids.
Yes, you have been a huge proponent of the brown liquid, as we've referred to it on other occasions.
Yes. I did not have Buffalo Trace, although I did manage to find some over the weekend and indulged. After the bartender told me the only thing they had was Jim Beam, and I'm like, there's a bottle of Buffalo Trace sitting on your shelf right there. Oh, is that bourbon? Anyway.
He was going to take that sucker home.
I am participating in the Four Roses.
Oh, that's good stuff. I like that.
So, Walt, what are you drinking?
Man, I'm drinking some high quality H2O.
These are their Bobby Boucher.
Say cheers, because so am I.
Hey, there we go. We'll have to see at halftime. Might switch it up, but I'll have to get some recommendations from y'all from the dad.
I may pull out some of the rye Dana got me, the specialty rye, out of the cupboard here by the end of this particular episode. But what's your relationship to the film?
Man, so this came out 2004. I was in 4th grade.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and I don't exactly remember what age I was, but it was definitely at the very, if it wasn't 2 years after that, it was in middle school. And it was immediately my favorite movie. And rewatchability, I've probably seen this movie close to 10 times. It's just and I never get tired of it. Matter of fact, rewatching it in preparation for this. It's been like probably 10 years since I've seen it, but I just fell in love with it all over again and just like have a whole new perspective on it as well. Like, one thing I didn't realize or pay close attention to before is just how often Denzel is playing character where is kind of tied or has some relationship with religion and God, and him being like a pastor or preacher in real life too is just so interesting. Like, Denzel, one of those people who like it feels like he gets to pick his roles at every single time, and it's like, okay, he's always telling some type of story in relation to it as well. So yeah, I just fell in love with it again, and also shout out to Dakota Fanning,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow,
Incredible little
9
actor
years old.
at that point.
Oh yeah, that is definitely going to be coming up later on in the episode. So, gentlemen, what is this movie about?
Second chances.
For multiple people in the story, or just for Creasy?
I would say just for Creasy. Yeah, because it's just, I think that at just certain points we kind of saw him pivot, just his whole demeanor, his attitude towards life, and just like how he viewed his kind of role as the bodyguard. It was just so interesting. It's almost like he went down there to just kind of give up and drink till he was completely done, but then all of a sudden he just kind of new life brought back into him.
So, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1. I would also argue that Peta and her mother also have a second chance because she lives and their family can live on.
Yeah.
I think for Creasy, he's lived a life and that life has altered him, and he believes he can't go back. And so therefore he is just a creation of his own making, his own series of concessions to violence and performing in a job as a contract killer for the government, etc. And he perceives that there's nothing he's going to ever do that's going to ever be able to wash away those sins. And within this context, he sees an opportunity, even though he's there and using the skills he learned as a result of this painful life he's led. It allows him to try to redeem some portion of his life by using those skills for the benefit of the girl.
I certainly see it as kind of a moral arc within the course of the story. There is a lot of themes to explore here. Family, because early on, I think he's kind of alone and he develops this relationship kind of unwillingly or involuntarily with Peta, but that fuels his need for revenge. And so I think there is a lot about the meaning of anyone's particular life. You know, can I make up for the mistakes that I've made? Can I pass down something worthwhile to a next generation? Redemption is a huge arc of this particular movie, sacrifice. But there's a lot of also geopolitics when it comes to Mexico and Latin America and the kidnapping arc that I don't think are unintentional. In fact, I think they're very intentionally included in this movie because the original version is in Italy. This is in Latin America for a completely separate purpose.
Might be why they had the at the end in the credits it says something like "Thank you, Mexico" or something like that.
Well, I think they had to, and I was going to explore this on the Did You Know section, but they had to have a lot of help from the Mexican government specifically to be able to do this film. There was a lot of protection that was needed in order to kind of do the production for not only the individual actors, but the crew themselves as well.
The crew was getting carjacked and stuff like that. It's terrible. I was reading about it. It was like,
yeah.
Ooh.
As our resident Denzel action film aficionado, Walt, how would you say this ranks or stacks up in the Denzel action films?
That's a good question. I'd have to put it as number 2. Training Day as number 1, the top dog. I think this was an incredible movie, but the scenes in Training Day I feel like had more suspense to them for me. This one, like, I love it for the action though, but it would still be at number 2.
Yeah, I would definitely have it behind Training Day. And then you have to start thinking of Like Inside Man, I think is a really good movie, but is that really like an action movie? And he's not as kinetic. I think his turn in Manchurian Candidate wasn't too bad, but again, that's more of a thriller, and I don't know how much individual action there is, particularly in that one. You'd have to possibly explore something like, I believe he was in the remake of The Taking of Pelham 123, and then there are the Equalizer movies, which I haven't seen yet to this point. But all of those would be among consideration. But I think this is, and when I introduced it before, saying that this is probably the most beloved Denzel action film, I think there is a case to be made for that.
You know what? Another one to throw in there is Safe House.
Oh, sure.
As well. I forgot about that one. But still. Yeah, this is top 2 for me.
Yeah, number 3's got to be Preacher's Wife. It's a joke, guys. You can laugh.
Okay, so I haven't seen that.
But either.
What to say, Fences next?
Mm-hmm.
He's literally playing the pastor to a preacher's wife, which is Whitney Houston, and so it's like a rom-com.
Oh. Huh. Denzel in a rom-com. Got it.
Mid-90s. Different time. So, Dad, you had a question for us.
Yes. In doing the research for the show, the studio wanted Tony Scott to cast a different actor as the lead. They wanted Gene Hackman. How different of a film would it have been with Gene Hackman as the lead instead of Denzel?
Now, I have to mention before we get there, in a movie we didn't just mention, because I don't really consider it an action film. I consider it more of a psychological thriller. But Crimson Tide was the last movie he worked on with both of those two actors. So these were the two leads in that same other movie, just for context. But I think Gene Hackman doing an action film, and this is about the time that he retired from acting too, because I want to say Welcome to Mooseport is his last film, and that I think was 2003. So for him to do this potentially as his last film, while I think it would have been a better send out than Welcome to Mooseport, just seems a little odd.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing is, like, I think this would be a very different movie. I think it'd be slower paced. I think it'd be less kinetic. I think it would be less beloved by especially audiences in the maybe millennial to very elderly Zoomer kind of category, because this, like, Denzel was on his way up, whereas Hackman's on his way out. I think you would have sold this movie to a completely different crowd of maybe late boomers, early Gen Xers and things like that, who were watching Hackman, who was their guy 30 years ago, versus Denzel, who was, ascendant at that time, if you will.
Don't get me wrong. I love Gene Hackman. I love a lot of his work in the 70s and the 80s. He's a fantastic actor. Anytime he shows up, I'm just happier for it. But Denzel has a range to be able to play very serious characters, very kinetic characters, very vocal and vibrant characters, and also play action heroes that are all believable. So I think he has probably one of the best ranges for the types of films that he can do of any actor of probably the last 30 years. And to expect somebody like Gene Hackman in his twilight years to be able to compete on this same level, it's just a completely different movie. It'd be to me, it's almost the equivalent of Christopher Walken and Denzel switching parts in this movie. That also would be just completely random.
That'd be interesting, seeing Christopher Walken blowing fingers off.
So, Dad, you ready to give us some more background on the movie? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. In Man on Fire, a former CIA operative turned bodyguard, Denzel Washington, takes on a new job protecting a young girl, Dakota Fanning, in Mexico City. As their bond grows, he becomes fiercely devoted to her safety. When she is kidnapped, he unleashes his lethal skills to bring justice to those responsible. The film blends intense action with heartfelt moments, showcasing Denzel Washington's commanding presence and the emotional depth of the story. Director Tony Scott crafts a gripping narrative filled with tension and redemption, making Man on Fire a thrilling and emotionally resonant experience.
Thank you. Did you know? Most of the scenes between Denzel Washington and Christopher Walken were completely improvised. Did you know? Writer Brian Helgeland first saw the original Man on Fire when he was renting videos in the late 80s. He walked into the video store where Quentin Tarantino was working and asked what was good. Tarantino recommended Man on Fire.
No way.
Wow.
Very much way.
What?
And also released today on Deadline, but he has scrapped his working script for his next movie, his last movie, and he's going to completely start over because he just didn't feel it was worth his final film effort.
Mm.
Wow.
Good for him. Maybe he can go back to working at a Blockbuster. Recommending movies to Brian Elgin.
He was famous for that, and that's how he got the
that's
title
hilarious.
with Reservoir Dogs.
Mhm.
So if you don't know the story behind that one, go ahead and YouTube that. Did you know? Denzel Washington was so impressed with Dakota Fanning's acting that he'd watch her and forget he was in the scene.
Wow.
And it's believable.
Yeah.
Oh, it totally is. But it's really sweet, too.
Did you know? The kidnappers' first names, Daniel and his brother Aurelio, are the actual first names of real-life Mexico City kidnappers in the late 90s, Daniel and Aurelio Arizmendi Lopez, the famous earlopers.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's just a creepy-ass name. Did you know? Mexico City police told Tony Scott that his crew was targeted for kidnapping. Several crew members were robbed at gunpoint. Rhoda Mitchell had 3 bodyguards protecting her when she was in Mexico for the filming. She said they were hired after her driver was carjacked at gunpoint in Mexico City. And Mexico City Police Chief Marcelo Ebrard helped with the movie and hoped it would shine a light on the kidnapping issue, which I believe it did. So, with that, we will take our first break and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week we take another break in our regular episodes to bring you a very special episode, our Pantheon of Directors. We will be holding a draft to narrow our list down to our top 50 directors, and then we will be slotting them into our 4 tiers on our Gmote pyramid to give you what we think are the greatest movie directors of all time. We are expecting to have a lot of fun, so make sure you are subscribed to this feed to get that episode. All right, gentlemen, we left off at best performance. Dad, who do you have down?
Well, it was a toss-up between best performance and best secondary. Simply because of the amount of heavy lifting, I went with Denzel.
And I don't think that I can really fault anyone for going Denzel, but I thought this was a runaway for Dakota Fanning. I think she is exceptional in this movie.
I will put a checkbox right, or checkmark right next to that, Tom.
I had her a second.
Yeah. Dakota Fanning definitely stole it. I did have her a second at first when I thought about it, but no, every scene she was in, especially the end, I was like, oh, and she was 9 years old doing that? No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's particularly close. I mean, no disrespect to Denzel. I've already sung his praises, saying he's one of the best ranges of the last 30 years. But any scene that she was in, she just made better in this movie. And I can't say that of all of her film performances, but for whatever Tony Scott got out of her for this movie, I just think she was incredible.
And what you said before about Denzel would just like kind of just get lost with watching her act. I just keep thinking about certain moments in the movie where he was just looking at her and it felt like appropriate, but I was like, oh man, maybe he like, that was one of those moments, or he just was like, you know what, that was good. Let me just, the director said do it again or something. But yeah, it was amazing. Very impressed.
Rob, who did you have?
Oh, it's totally Dakota. That's number one. It just to get that level of work and emotion out of an 8 or 9 year old at the time. You can go up to go to any elementary school, take the entire second grade class, bunch of 8, 9 year olds, right? Ask any of them to do even a remotely close job to this. You will burn through every school in the district. You will burn through every school in the state, I bet, to find somebody who's a comparable actor to that young lady there.
I'll take it one step further. I did not only just have her for best performance, I had her for most charismatic as well, because the first half of the movie, you have to be drawn into her. You have to feel that she is this like worthwhile, bright light shining in the early part of the film. Feel this instant connection so that you're getting an admiration and adoration towards her. So that when she leaves, then you feel the Denzel push to go on a complete rampage against every other bad guy in the movie. And she has to carry a lot more weight in my mind for being off screen for half of the film than Denzel does for having to be on it for the entire film.
I think it's a really good point in that she has to make you love her the way Denzel loves her, or love her. Well, you would think that the way her father would love her, but that's the way any parent should love their child. She has to make you love her within those first couple scenes, if you will, and not think that she's just some little spoiled rich brat and things like that. Because there's other things that she has to make you not think about her. You have to love her and think that she's great, but you also have to understand that, yes, while she lives a privileged life and things like that, that she's not a bad person and that she's worth saving.
After seeing Mark Anthony in this, I hope that this movie was played at J-Lo's custody hearing.
I think I had that queued up for this episode.
All right, best secondary. I know that 3 of us had Dakota Fanning, so I would assume all 3 of us then have Denzel as our secondary.
Yeah.
And Dad, you're the opposite. You went Dakota Fanning as your secondary. Yeah, I don't think there's really 2 ways about it. They're the 2 most important people to this movie, as far as I can tell.
I have a Rada Mitchell, or I don't know how to pronounce her name, but the mom, have her as like honorable mention for second.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, I
her.
agree.
She had the strong slaps. Those slaps went, they were her. She killed that.
So anything more we want to say on either Dakota Fanning or Denzel?
Not really.
Okay.
What was the most charismatic?
Well, I gave my most charismatic, but I was just going to go around. So
Okay.
why don't you start, Dad?
I had Christopher Walken. No, I didn't.
You got me.
If you were going to do that, you probably had to attempt impersonation.
No, I had Dakota Fanning. I thought about Mickey Rourke too, but
What the fuck? That would have been an all-time left field. He's in 2 scenes for about 30 seconds apiece.
Yep.
but he's
Like,
such a
it was
scumbag lawyer. He just I've known so many Mickey Rourkes in that role. Yeah.
Walt, who's your most charismatic?
Actually put Christopher Walken down because I feel like he needs to be recognized. Like through him, we learned more about Denzel, and he just always seemed like the life of like he was the only light before Dakota Fanning for Denzel and everything. He's like always the life of the party and stuff. So I had to go with Christopher Walken.
All right, Rob, are you also going Christopher Walken, or
No,
are you going
no.
with Mickey Rourke?
Yeah. Yikes.
You went Mark Anthony, didn't you?
No,
I
mean,
know you did.
I enjoyed his performance. I think the thing to say about this is that the cast, I think, does a very good job, regardless of whether they are most charismatic or not. It's a well cast movie. I do want to give the most charismatic to Dakota Fanning. Again, I think she just kind of swept this for me because the talent, young age, just the feels that I get from watching this movie with her in there. And then the other thing, I just always, you think of charisma as, there's young people call it Riz now, but sometimes in Latin America it's called machismo and things like that. The one guy who I do think has some charisma is the guy who's duct taped to the steering wheel with Creasy. Because he's got those glasses and he's kind of got that look of like, do you know who I am? And he's a little bit charming, and then the switchblade comes out and he's got problems.
I thought also briefly about the actual explosive enema. That was charisma. Wow.
Well, it was certainly motivating.
Yes.
The question I have, and I thought about saving it for unresolved questions or at the end, but can you imagine Denzel putting that there?
Talk about explosive diarrhea.
You got to be clinical with that stuff. When you're Denzel there, you're just like, nope, this is just going places.
And it sounded like he knew what he was doing. So, yeah. He's been in the CIA for a long time, causing.
Yep.
What they say he was a painter of death or something? Yeah, nice.
An artist of
Artist
death.
of
Yeah.
death, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it got the job done. Love makes you do strange things.
He could have put it on his back.
It's a little bit more eyebrow raising for the audience if he doesn't, though.
It was eyebrow raising for the dude, too. Hi, I put this thing inside of you and you're going to explode like a water balloon.
Yeah, since we never see it, you could just allude to it and it has the exact same effect. Like, there's a bomb under the table or there's a gun against your hip or something like that. You don't have to show it. Just the mention of it does carry some weight.
Yes.
So, yes, you have a bomb up your ass.
Just so you know.
Like the guy wouldn't wake up and feel like, Hey, I think there's more in me than I remember.
I feel a little full. Yeah.
Man, do I need to take a shit?
I could have sworn I went before I left the house.
All right, best scene. So I only have 5 nominated, and you guys can add any more as you'd like. But I have the swimming drills montage, just because, and I think that covers like 3 different portions of the movie. But I thought that's when this movie really sings, at least for the Dakota Fanning and like infatuation scenes between the developing relationship between Denzel and Dakota. Then I have the small cut scene of You're Smiling when you kind of see the walls start to come down for him for the first time. I think that's a great vulnerable scene. I have the fight scene in the club, which I think is an exceptional one. I have the scene we just mentioned, President of La Hermandad, the bomb up the ass. And then the final exchange where he goes out to the bridge and basically sacrifices himself to let her go free. Did you have any others that you'd like me to include?
I hope this doesn't make me sound absolutely barbaric, but I love the fingers scene. I really like the fingers scene because it's great acting on both parts, but also it's just like in the suspension of disbelief, you know that Creasy is not messing around at all because he's like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question. It's fine, and you're gonna give me an answer." The guy kind of looks at him over his sunglasses and everything like that, and he goes, "Oh, so you're not giving one?" And just saws his index finger off, like just no chill whatsoever. And then like it's a great scene for like, oh shit, this guy is so screwed. And again, the whole setup is again very. It's a terrible thing to do to somebody. Don't get me wrong; it's an awful thing to do to another human being. But it's so well done and so well thought out and so well planned that it's just like this guy is serious. They talk about the professional line. The guy in the car with the fingers says it. The president of La Hermandad says it. Yeah, they're not. Creasy is.
Any other ones to add for anyone?
Well, the scene with the explosive suppository was, but I'm afraid to say that was my favorite scene because it might reveal too much about my inner personality.
Dude, hey, Dana, I've got people sawing fingers off here.
Again, we're just taking nominations at the moment. We'll get to the actual selection of the best scene in a second. So any other ones to add for recognition?
I would add when he's on the roof, that whole scene of busting in, finding out that, Dakota Fanning, Peter is still alive, blowing the fingers off. So we got some more
removing digits,
barbering on there. That was like unhinged. Like it didn't have to do that, but and then just hanging up like, call me back, boom. I was like, no, that's next level.
All right, so we have 7 in contention here. Out of these, what is the best scene? Let's start with you, Walt.
On the bridge, we got Peter back, that whole interaction. I felt that. That was definitely the best scene.
I'm going to sign on to that one too. That reunion scene is so wonderful. But then it's almost immediately turns to ash as you see Peeta and her mother drive away. But the guy you've been rooting for the entire movie is going to die. And probably not in a great way.
I had the swimming drills montage simply because I think that scene sets up the relationship of the two and kind of is the catalyst for the rest of the film, because the rest of the film doesn't make any sense but for that.
I went on a similar line. I have the You're Smiling kind of small sub scene, just because for the entirety of the first act of the movie, we've gotten him trying not to let his guard down and, no more questions. Stop talking to me. I'm trying to do my job. And she finally starts to kind of get into his vulnerable places, and he lets his guard down and he realizes it quickly. But that interaction, I think, really sets off where we're going to go with the revolving action of the second act, and obviously makes the payoff of the third act really important. So while I think the swimming drills is exceptional, that little moment, I think, is what really tips everything else off as far for me. Favorite scene, if you're not going to go there, Dad, I'm going to. It's the most badass scene of the entire film, is the bomb suppository, president of La Hermandad. The guy's strapped to the
Yeah.
hood. Oh, you only have like 5 minutes to tell me what I need to know. And you know he's going to blow up. The only thing that undoes that for me is if you watch as the car is burning and they cut to it at the end, there's no man standing on the
Yep.
front of the hood. You couldn't, for a $60 or $70 million film, put some type of mannequin or something there as like a replacement that could have taken that effect. But no, okay, we're just not good at our jobs. But all right, that's more of my comment on the directing than anything.
He wouldn't be there yet. He would have been disintegrated.
Yeah, but you'd still have arms. You'd still have arms zip tied to the
That would have been
hood.
cooler.
Yes, it would have
Just
been.
Yes,
arms,
I agree with
arms,
that.
Arms
And
hanging.
maybe some feet or like some shins down or something like that. And then there'd be hamburger all over the place.
Maybe a head laying on the ground.
Or rolling
like,
around.
Or like an upper
Yeah.
part of a torso or something like that. Like, because, it's in the bottom part of you. No pun intended. That's going to absorb a lot of shock and probably leave you kind of ribs up, maybe, depending on how much you packed up there.
Yeah. I also have that as my most indelible. So I'm going to go there.
Anybody notice any of the potential here of all of the people suffering and killed all have their hands bound or are bound with their arms extended?
Mm.
I mean, it just seems almost like, okay, are we trying to make some of these people into Christ figures?
Well, I wouldn't say that so much as doing some type of crucifixion style execution, because I think
Yeah.
he's turned much more into a Christ-like figure by the end of the film,
Mhm.
especially with his sacrifice. I exchange my life for hers.
Right.
Yeah.
Favorite scene for you, Rob?
Favorite scene. It's the fingers.
I would say for mine, the swimming drills, my favorite, just because just like I forgot the line, but that just played into her almost escaping when they're trying to kidnap him, shooting the gun off. It's like a callback, like, I trained you for this, you're ready, and she took off. So because of that, that whole swimming thing, and then also just oh no, it's a separate one. Well, part two is actually going to the racing, being like, yeah, today you're the father. So I thought that was just a good moment, transitional, pivotal moment for him as well. So put that as a favorite. But the subs there are definitely the ones you just said.
Dad.
I guess I was thinking about swimming drills, but in actuality, since you've already picked the explosive suppository, I'll go with that too, because it really was my favorite scene. I just thought it sounded too creepy.
And you already got my most indelible moment, so what was yours, Dad?
The final exchange.
And Walt?
Honestly, the part I remember when I'm getting ready to watch it, I was like preparing for it, like, oh, it's here, is the fingers getting cut off. I think I remember that from the first time I was watching it.
Right. Yeah. 12-year-old Walt here looking like, oh gosh, he's actually taking those guy's fingers off.
I was
like
like,
with
oh!
a knife. You know? Yeah, my most indelible moment is when Creasy confronts Peter's father. And he says, the bullet didn't do it for me, but maybe it can do it for you. And he leaves him with a Glock 19 and a single round. And you hear that gunshot because you know that that man has betrayed that little girl so much. And the best thing that he can do for himself is to end his life.
Going off the board.
Wow.
So that will take us to break number 2. We will be right back. So if you need to stock up on brown liquor, now is the time to do so.
What kind of wine, Walt?
We have an Aldi Pinot Noir.
An
Oh, wait, do y'all have
Aldi.
Aldis?
Pinot Noir. It's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Aldi, yes. It's very French. It's actually German.
Well, Walt, or they get their wine from other people.
Yeah. Oh wait, not Pinot Noir. It's a Merlot actually.
I
Oh.
love a good Merlot.
Mm.
Oh, don't come on for Sideways. The sales of Pinot Noir shot immediately up, and Merlot went way down after that movie.
Mm. Oh, I'm familiar.
Like
with that one.
a statistically significant percentage.
Weird.
Oh wow! So I type in sideways and Merlot right after that. So
It's a very famous part of the film where Paul Giamatti just goes off because they're going to have to drink Merlot, and he just...
He hates Merlot.
Merlot's wonderful.
He thinks it's a trashy wine.
Oh,
And having met Alexander Payne, it is among his humor style. Unfortunately, gentlemen, I will have to bore you a little bit with some Alexander Payne talk at the end of this.
Wow.
I didn't know
That's-
y'all knew what Aldi's was.
Dude, Aldi's
Yeah, of course we do.
incredible.
I thought it was just in the, well, at least America. What I thought it was just a southern.
No, we got them all
no,
over the place
no,
up here,
Oh,
man.
no.
Oh,
My mother has been singing oldie praises for, as long as I can remember. And when we got one in Wisconsin Rapids, probably 25 years ago, that's been like a mainstay of her grocery shopping.
Yeah, we've been shopping them for at least 10 or 15. Yeah, it's...
I have one 3 minutes away from me.
oh, nice.
Yeah, I got one
I'm
like 5 or
jealous.
7. Yeah, it's fabulous.
I have to go like 15, 20, but
Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnyDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 191 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Also, you can follow each individual episode on our website as well. That has the notes for every individual episode with all of our scores, category nominations, and the individual factoids for each episode of this show. Just click the link in the episode description of this episode or go to RonnyDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast to find that. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Richard Horowitz, 75, American film composer. The Three Seasons, Tobruk, and Any Given Sunday. Ron Thompson, 83, American actor, was in the TV show Beretta, Cargo, and American Pop. Eleanor Coppola, 87, American filmmaker. Heart of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse, Paris Can Wait, Love is Love is Love, was the wife of Francis Ford Coppola. Trina Robbins, 85, American comic book artist and writer. It Ain't Me, Babe, Women's Comics, and Wonder Woman. And then lastly, O.J. Simpson, 76, American Hall of Fame football player with the Buffalo Bills and San Francisco 49ers, and actor, The Naked Gun and The Towering Inferno. Won the Heisman Trophy in 1968.
So to back up for a second, Eleanor Coppola is famous for the documentary Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse about the making of Apocalypse Now. And for a lot of the information that we now understand about the making of that movie and how much it drove Francis Ford Coppola almost insane, if not completely insane. All of her documentary work and kind of her home videos were eventually converted into this well-known documentary well after the fact that almost won an Oscar. As far as the most famous name on the list, or should I say infamous, it is hard to deny the cultural impact that one Orenthal James the Juice Simpson had on American culture. Whether that was being possibly the most famous athlete of the 1970s and one of the most revered athletes up until his criminal associations, and then to basically create the court TV obsession that this country has over the last 30 years with his trial that just about everybody watched. I mean, I was too young for this to have had any impact on me. I have no idea where I was when the Bronco chase happened. I was not old enough to really be of any note. And really, most of my relationship to the O.J. Simpson trial is well after the fact, when we started to have series like O.J. Simpson versus America, or whatever that series was on FX that was well done. And then the eventual O.J. Made in America documentary that won the Oscar for Best Documentary that year, which I think both were exceptional pieces of material. But I didn't live through this. But for everyone that did live through it, it was a monoculture moment in time that I don't know if we have the ability to experience again. So for what it's worth, we memorialize him here.
I can tell you exactly where you were during the Bronco chase. You were in bed in our house in Mauston because I came home. We were with Allison's godfather and his wife. We went out for dinner. They were staying over for the weekend. The sitter had all of you kids in bed, and we came home and she had the TV on. And I'm looking and I'm going, why are we looking at this Bronco driving around? And then all of a sudden I'm going, oh, it's OJ. So we're sitting there watching this whole thing transpire and thinking this might be the second murder to happen live on TV, this time at least being a suicide. Because I thought for sure that it was ultimately going to be him killing himself before that Bronco got very far. I remember that very specifically.
Yeah, I didn't see it live, but I was old enough to be able to watch the news and stuff like that. And I just remember seeing all the time, that white Bronco, helicopter footage following the Bronco all over the place. And again, it being, I think, probably have to check what year that was. Dana, you remember what year that was?
1994.
1994. So I was 8. I was 8 at the time, but old enough to be able to watch the little white TV in my parents' kitchen, and all they talk about was OJ. All they talk about was OJ. It was weird. So I didn't exactly know. Like I learned that OJ Simpson, famous football player from a long time ago. He potentially killed his wife and Ron Goldman, and this was like a bad thing. Like, this is just a news thing, but it was so impactful because it's the first thing outside of probably the first thing outside of 9/11 I can remember. So I was too young for all the Gulf War shit.
I mean, if you were 8, I would liken it to kind of my experience with the Lewinsky scandal. That was one of the first things that I really remember being a part of culture.
Right.
For the first time, other than maybe the election of 1996, but I only knew that kind of in passing.
Bob Dole.
I wasn't completely involved or anything. I just knew Bob Dole, Bill Clinton. But that was because my father was politically involved at the time. Certainly not any like great associations or anything else like that.
Right. But the cultural impact too, I think, was just unbelievably incredible. Of like, now court TV exists, and now true crime is a huge thing, and all of these things that have been, we're on a podcast, but there are hundreds of thousands of other podcasts that are not like this, that are all based around crime. And I think honestly, it starts the genesis of the entire podcast genre for true crime is probably OJ car chase.
I was under 12 months old.
It was June 1994.
Okay, yeah. I was literally 5 months old at that time.
Oh, that's amazing. So what do you remember about it, Walt?
Yes. I remember I was trying to get fed and no one was paying attention to me. Yeah, no, I think it's similar to you though, Tom, in later, obviously later on, but yeah, that trial crazy huge. I think especially in the Black community, there's always the stance is he didn't do it publicly, but also was he might have, I don't know, but it's crazy. But then also the racial components of the cases, on the nuances there. So that was huge. I think that's really why everyone was so behind him. But then just since then, culturally, just the jokes that have come from it, the different stories. I know there was in Shrek, there was a reference to it. I think either the second or third Shrek, I don't remember which one. It was a reference to when Donkey turned into the horse and they were oh, it's a white Bronco running down. It's just all these different moments, a little Easter egg hints back to it. And Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, just all these different shows always just reference to it for decades. And I know since he passed, there's been the just all these different videos just popping up on social media, and I'm yo, this guy's wild. He would joke about it all the time, make references to stabbing. It's crazy. So I don't know, big mystery question mark, but yeah, can't take away the cultural impact before that and after. Crazy.
Well, every Monday night you would tune into Monday Night Football in the 70s, and you'd watch Howard Cosell do the highlights, and he would just spend several minutes on the Bills games, even though the Bills were not a relevant football team, because it was just cool to see highlights. You didn't see football except your local broadcast, except on Monday night, and you never saw any of the other games, and you'd see OJ. And OJ had, real significant bits because, he's running through the airport, jumping over suitcases and couches and such for Hertz Rent-A-Car. He was huge. I mean, everybody knew who the Juice was. Then he goes into acting and looks to be doing very well. And then the trial. And as a lawyer and as a criminal defense lawyer at that time specifically, I constantly were asked questions, and I kept saying over and over again, there's two things that you can say for certain. One is LAPD is notorious for planting evidence. They have for years, and they've gotten away with it. Number two, I have yet to see a criminal defendant who has money and can afford the experts and the investigators who gets convicted. And that's exactly what the situation was for both.
Well, before we devolve into our two-tiered legal system,
yes,
the haves and the have-nots, which I'm sure we could spend a considerable amount of time on, let's get back to the vigilantism of Denzel. But first off, apologies. Yeah. Apologies to all of the other people that we mentioned here before, that you have clearly been overshadowed, like a lot of people were during the years of O.J. Simpson being in the news, by his just sheer presence and passing away in this 1 week. But we commemorate them all here for their contributions and their infamy with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's switch up tasks. And normally we would go to quotes here, but since we've been tacking these on at the end, I think I'm going to switch it up, and we'll introduce a few Ask Dana Anything questions here in this spot. So let's start with one that was submitted via our social media accounts over the weekend. Would Dana consider replacing Judge Judy?
I'd watch the shit out of
that. Sure. I mean, that would be awesome.
You have to do
I would have so much fun with that.
The elf makeup ad, though, and look really good doing it. Somebody did some great facelift work on her.
Yeah, no, I would in a heartbeat. First of all, she made a ton of money. And second of all, it's not much work. I mean, you don't have to do any prep. You just sit there and listen to these people drone on, and then you just try to find some way of being snarky. And heavens knows, I find being snarky rather easy.
Is that why your friends refer to you as the bridge troll?
Yes.
And that leads into our second question. And before I have this question out, I should say the phrase Dana okay has been trademarked, apparently by some friends of the show and recurring guests that we've had on. Apparently, it's supposed to mean an okay that Dana gives when he is exasperated with me and has nothing else to say, but it's usually full of contempt. So, how close have you been to contempt of court by using the trademark Dana okay at an asshole judge?
I'm not sure how close, but I have danced around that flagpole many, many times. I now that I'm doing administrative law and the administrative law judges, I push back rather hard. In fact, I had a judge who he and I did not like each other very much, and I would play that up because I knew I could get him so riled up he'd make mistakes. So when he denied my case, I'd have an appeal.
Would this person happen to be the loser's trophy for our fantasy football league?
No, he was just an asshole.
That's why he's the last place trophy.
Yes, this judge was different. For example, he was criticizing, he was going, on and on because I had a case remanded from the federal court. And he was going on about how he doesn't understand this because he's the LJ and he has greater latitude to decide these cases. And he's tired of these federal judges telling him, what he's doing wrong all the time and blah, blah, blah. And he's going on. And I said, just a second, Judge, would you stop a minute? He goes, what? I just want to make sure that the tape recorder is getting your comments recorded so that when you deny this case again, I can put this back in front of federal Judge Griesbach And so he knows exactly what you think of his decisions.
Gotcha.
Yo.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by tap dancing around. A lot of circuit judges would have put me in contempt for something like that. But they don't have that kind of authority, so I know better. I have a little greater latitude.
Well, Mr. Andrew Acorns, Corn Dog, I hope you got your money's worth out of that question. All right. So let's move to best funniest lines then. I will start us off and we can kind of go in round robin fashion, but Rayburn, a man can be an artist in anything, food, whatever. It depends on how good he is at it. Creasy's art is death. He's about to paint his masterpiece. All right, whoever would like to go.
This one I thought was funny. Being black, is that positive or negative for a bodyguard in Mexico? Peter.
Elderly man. In the church, they say to forgive. Greasy. Forgiveness is between them and God. It is my job to arrange the meeting.
Daniel Sanchez over the phone with Creasy. You have my family. So how much do you want? Creasy. Your brother wants to say something to you. Hold on. He blows his fingers off the shotgun.
Creasy. Okay, my friend, it's off to the next life for you. I guarantee you won't be lonely.
It's badass.
Miguel Manzano. When I heard it was this hospital, I was so pleased. Delgado's is the best pastry shop.
Rayburn. He'll deliver more justice in a weekend than 10 years of your courts and tribunals.
Said a couple times throughout the movie, a bullet always tells the truth.
All right, my last one. Do you think God will forgive us for what we've done? Rayburn, no.
Greasy. Do you know what this is? It's a charger used by convicts to hide money and drugs they tuck up in their rectum. This is pencil detonator, timer, used as a device from the pager. This is C4, highly explosive, but you put it all together and you've got a bomb. Not very sophisticated, but very powerful. That's what you have in your ass right now. Don't move. Don't move.
Fuentes. A last wish. Please, please, please. Creasy. Last wish. I wish you had more time.
Fuentes again with both of his hands zip tied to that car hood. You know I'm a professional. Creasy says, that's what everybody keeps saying. I'm just a professional. Everybody keeps saying that to me. I'm just a professional. I'm just a professional. I'm getting sick and tired of hearing that.
All right, anyone have any left?
Not necessarily a line, but I do love that she calls him Creasy Bear. I think it's adorable.
Most definitely. Oh, actually, last one. I forgot exactly how it went, but it's when the voice was talking to the mom. It's like, oh, I wish we talked sooner. I just love that kind of line. It's like, oh, we could have avoided all of this.
All right, let's move to the Stanley rubric and put this to the test. Legacy is up first. You both have been through the gauntlet before. We divide this category into two parts between audience and the industry. Who would like to start?
I think I'll start this one. Legacy, I think with the audience, this is a quintessential kind of millennial movie. Walt saw this when he was very young, and it's, impacted him at a young age. I watch this movie probably once every year or so to just re-experience it and things like that. And I'm not necessarily I like Denzel Washington, but I don't go out of my way to go find Denzel movies or anything like that. But I think for the audience, the legacy is it kind of cemented Denzel in, I think, audiences' minds as the badass. Yes, he'd been in other roles and things like that before that were supporting actor and, maybe a little bit more cerebral. I think, Tom, you mentioned earlier, like Crimson Tide, a little bit different than, kind of a heavy action movie. I think for audiences, for legacy, this was the one that put Denzel truly on the map for legacy as an action star. So I think for that, it's going to get a 4.25 out of me, 4.25. And then critics, I think, just knowing how much they panned it, I think they just thought it was another action movie and it just happened to have an African-American lead. And I don't think they respected the fact that this was so, especially in early 2000s, that this is something that helped change and make the action movie genre a bit more diverse, which is great. So for them, I would say it's probably a 3.5. Let's go 3.5.
Okay, so doing the math on that, that's a
7 3/4.
7.75. Boy, I'm not making the math easy for me right
Nope.
off the gate here.
Walt, do sevenths.
Oh,
Right. I was going to have a 0.75 in there.
You know, 5 out of 4 people can't do fractions.
Shh.
I just input the numbers.
Yeah, Walt should do sevenths.
Audience score. This is definitely iconic movie. I can't help but just think about his other performances that have just gone even farther and have more of a legacy in this one. So for that, I think I had 3.75 just because I don't know if people talk about it as much anymore, and I'm kind of surprised. I think it at the time period it would have been higher, but now at this point, I don't notice as many references to it. It's just a kind of 3.75 audience. I didn't know that the critics did not like it at the time. That was news to me up until now. So for that I give it a 3.
Okay, so you're at a 6.75. Okay,
You have a calculator.
I know. I'm aware. Thankfully, the 7.5s kind of cancel each other out because it goes to a 1.5 point. But regardless, all right. I think there is a point to be made. I would have been much harsher on this on the industry, or at least I had thought I was going to be. Robb makes an excellent point that this is kind of the second half of Denzel's career. The first half is kind of awards-worthy. He's doing very straight-laced parts. He's got both of his Oscars, one for Glory, one for Training Day. He's much less kinetic. Even though he's been in Crimson Tide, that's a fairly straight-laced role. This one, he's a little bit more unhinged, and it kind of leads into a lot of the other films that we were talking about, whether it's Inside Man, Taking of Pelham 123, the Equalizer movies, whether it's going into his further work with Antoine Fuqua or more of his Tony Scott work. He just decides that he wants to do more fun action pictures, a lot more than he's doing necessarily like high degree acting roles. He still does a few of those. Obviously, American Gangster's in there. He does Flight, Roman J. Israel. Those are some more of his other
Hamlet.
ones. But yeah, that's true. Or no, he didn't do Hamlet. He did Macbeth.
That's right. Excuse me, Macbeth.
But he balances those out with also doing the ones that he doesn't have to be serious Denzel in. He could just be a badass. So I'll give it an extra half point from where I was originally at, and I'll go a 2 on that side because I don't think the industry particularly respects this movie. From a critical standpoint, from a money-making standpoint, I think for the most part, it's relatively dismissed. I'll give it a few points because there are a few people or a few fans that are pro movies that do enjoy this movie. From an audience side, though, I think that there is somewhat of a cult status for this movie, but I don't think it's as widely shared among a certain grouping of people as Robb kind of insinuated there. Like, I hadn't seen this movie before until now. And I do think that there is a segment of the population that is not as familiar, even though they may know it by name and they know the persona that Denzel gets out of this movie. It's not that they've seen every Denzel action movie. They have seen maybe an Equalizer or they've seen one of his other Tony Scott movies. I don't know if they've seen every Denzel movie, and not necessarily like this one is propped up as being the quintessential Denzel action movie. So I have about a 3.5 on that side of it. So I have a 5.5. Dad?
The industry did not like this film. And a lot of the same reasons were noted. The only thing I would say from the industry that it gave Denzel broader opportunities for different types of roles to be an action hero in later films. So I'm going to give it a little bit of jump up and go with a 2.5 for the industry. The public. All right. I have staff meetings every Monday, as listeners are aware, and it's about 20, 22 people in my staff meeting, ranging in various levels of education and socioeconomic status.
All white, we should say.
Yes, that's the only drawback. But, considering where I am, it is what it is.
Central Wisconsin is not very diverse.
No.
No. But what I will do when I'm looking at public and legacy, I will ask questions of the staff. Of the 20 people I believe that were there, 3 people had heard of the movie, 2 had seen it.
Wow.
Seriously?
Yep.
Wow.
And there are plenty of millennials in that grouping.
Yes. So I had to give it points down because I don't think it has much impact outside of people who lived it when it was released or had some connection originally. So I don't think it's got quite the cult following that other films have. It had a nice run on video and such that probably went into that period for a while. So I went with a 2.5 for the public for a 4.5 overall.
So thank you, gentlemen. You ended up at a 6.13 average between
Yeah,
the four of us.
sevenths, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to end up with a weird ass score, but all right, impact and significance. I'll just get mine out of the way quickly here. It's not too very different from what my legacy score was, except that when it was released, I think it did have a little bit more juice, both with the industry and with the audience as a whole, just because we were in a different movie culture. Denzel was kind of transitioning to being a little bit different star. So I do think that there was a little bit more meat on the bone to say. And so I had a 2.5 and a 4. 2.5 for the industry, 4 for the audience. And so I have a 6.5.
Yeah, Tom, I think I'm going to echo that because that's about exactly where I feel it is as well, of this impact and significance far greater on the audience, the critics panning it and things like that, and not thinking it's a very great movie, and I think very worthy of that 2.5 or so. But yeah, again, with the audience looking, people talked about this movie for quite some time, as far as like, oh, have you seen Man on Fire? Have you seen Man on Fire? Man on Fire. And even though it doesn't maybe live up to today as much as it did, especially because of what Dana said with asking his staff, I think that 4 is pretty darn accurate. So I'm gonna go exactly in line with you on that with a 6.5 total.
Yeah, mine real quick. 3 again for the industry, but for audience, I have it as 4.5.
So a 7.5.
Yep.
I have 2 for the industry again to be consistent. But the public did, it made money. It wasn't a huge box office, but it made a ton on rental. This came out in the blockbuster era. So I went with 3.5 for the public. In fact, I'm actually going to go up a half more simply because of the public. And I'm going to go with a 4 for the public simply because of the video sales. Because having been the one person in this room who actually went to the video store and on a regular basis, and
how old do you think we are?
Found 8 or VHS tapes.
Yeah, I've rented VHS tapes. I'm not that young.
Yeah, we had a whole set of them.
We went to the video store.
Shout out to Blockbuster and Hollywood. What was that other one?
Hollywood Video, man. Yeah.
Hollywood Video,
yep.
yeah.
Get my Super Nintendo
family
games.
video here.
Don't think that we're like too young. Like we don't remember a time without the internet. Like I barely do, but I at least do that. Video rental stores were a thing up until about 10 years ago. I was old enough that they were still around while I was in college, let alone when I was driving and could go rent movies of my own.
Yeah, you mentioned Family Video. Family Video is amazing.
Now, if you want to talk to the 18-year-olds now, then yes. But, we're aged men here.
Ah, yes, aged.
Mm.
Like fine wine.
From Aldi.
So instead of my beautiful 6.5 average that we could have had, your little half-point stunt now raises it to a 6.63 average between the three of us.
Yeah, 7s.
I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, well, fuck you too. Anyway.
Yeah, well, okay.
All right, novelty. I probably shouldn't lead this one. So who would like to go first?
Well, Dana's gone last twice in a row, so let's kick him back up.
Yeah, let's start with Dad.
All right. I'm sorry. This is not that novel. This is shadows of all kinds of former spies and assassins and everything else. I will give it an interesting few points up because of the casting. It's set in Mexico, which, if not for the fact that they made the decision to cast Denzel, there would have been some props about picking on Mexicans and whatever. I mean, this made it kind of, it would became not, I don't want to say this wrongly, but it almost, by the way it was cast, took race out of the picture, if that makes any sense, because it kind of just didn't matter. I mean, it would have been real if you would have put a actor, even Gene Hackman, it would have been perceived at times as kind of anti-Mexican. And this doesn't come to this. This is anti-criminal, and it's guys who are living the life. You know, we had assassins from all walks of life that worked for the CIA. They were all bizarre, of course. So I'm actually going to give it a little bit higher than I would have normally, just because of the fact of the nature of the film itself. So I'm going to go with a 6 overall for novelty.
Who would like to go?
All right. Yeah, I think Dana touched on a couple of things like that. This Man on Fire is a movie of, it is not an original story. We have seen this like 20 times. We have seen a lot of this movie. Tough guy, vulnerable person, tough guy grows to love vulnerable person in some way, shape, or form. Vulnerable person is taken away from tough guy. Tough guy goes apeshit on everybody. It's a great movie formula. We've seen it a bunch before, but I will say that I like this version like the best. I think that's what this has going for it, is that it's flavored right. Like, if you like think of it, like the analogy here I'm going for is I'm going to Taco Bell and I'm getting my meal, and the meal is fine. I've had this meal a bunch, but this one I got a Baja Blast with, and instead of a Diet Coke or an orange soda or whatever it might be, and I like Baja Blast the best. And that's where we're at with this, which is I think that's what makes Man on Fire great. And I think the industry is probably going to treat that as I think a 2, which is I think accurate. But I think for consumers, I think that Baja Blast flavor is 4, so 6 total.
Let me just point out, the thought crossed my mind: how does this film different than Shane?
Well, that was not the movie that came to my mind. It was more, I think this is Die Hard in Mexico.
I was thinking Taken.
Well, I went back to a classic Western, which is Shane comes in, he kind of gets involved with the boy, and then he starts killing people in order to protect the family, and then ultimately has to fade into the Wild West and into the sunset. And
no, it's a valid point. I think, and forgive me, Walt, I think you're going to end on a more positive note than I am, so I'm going to let you go last so that people don't think that I'm just completely ruining this movie experience for them, the people that love this movie. I will say that you've convinced me that both the casting of Denzel and making it different by taking it out of Italy and making it in Mexico, that's a little bit more translatable, even into a modern sense. I think, with the amount of random kidnappings we've had of soccer players or different athletes or anybody closely associated to them, we know that this is still a problem all throughout Latin America and South America, for that matter. So I think it's a valid point. And also, casting a black man in the lead of an action movie was not something that was often being done, even though the action franchises and such had been a staple for 2+ decades. So for him to kind of have this role, even though I would say that he'd been the lead in a few thrillers, this was really his first full action role that I can remember. And somebody can correct me out on social media if I'm wrong on that. But I'll give it an extra point than what I originally had, because you've convinced me to go to a 3. However, this is where I've been experimenting with splitting the category 5 and 5 for the originality on one half and for the execution on the other half. Because execution for me with novelty is also a big thing. I gave this an extra half point now thinking about it for just the presence of Dakota Fanning. But I had this originally at a 1 for execution. I think Tony Scott did an awful job. The way that this is cut up, the amount of quick cuts that are just so bizarre, the amount of blurred images, it took me so out of the movie. For a movie that I was really looking forward to, and this is going to be obviously reflected in my rewatchability score, I was so drastically disappointed by this movie. It is 20 minutes too long. The action sequences take way too long to get to that point in the movie. While the moments with Dakota Fanning are great, and I wouldn't necessarily cut them, he takes way too long just sticking around in the hospital. We get these weird subplots and this backstory. We don't know why until like the explanation is presented to us for Mr. Ramos, why he's even selling his daughter off into kidnapping so that he can supposedly get the ransom money. It makes no sense. There's just so many problems outside of the actual acting that I had to give it about a 1 for the execution. I will raise it up to a 1.5 because Dakota Fanning is amazing in this. But ultimately, I come down at a 4.5 for novelty. So, Walt, now you can be positive and save the day in a way that I cannot.
Yeah.
Like Underdog.
I'll just say they made this movie under threats of actually getting kidnapped. A movie about kidnapping while almost getting kidnapped. I'm going with the 8.
Awesome.
Also, I will say, while I was watching all the special effects, I was just like, I would say out of all the things, I'll say this for the next part, I guess. But yeah, the special effects were kind of crazy. But at the time, I was like, oh. And so, yeah, definitely influenced and biased. I'll admit that. But yeah, 8.
Well, that means that my extra half point for Dakota Fanning screwed me. So we have a 6.13 again.
You have a tendency to screw yourself, Tom, whenever you can.
Well, that is kind of the terms of being single.
Wow. Suicide by words. Way to go.
Okay.
See, there it is. Trademark.
Bing.
All right, classicness. Oh, I'll make mine quick. I don't see anything necessarily ill classic. I don't see anything that's necessarily ahead of its time. I don't have any real timelessness factor on this, even though it's about 20 years old. I'm going to sit the fence and go with a 7.
I have a 7.5. Put it there. It is super rewatchable, but there are some things that just like in it. I do agree with you, Tom, your critique previously, and then also just when I think about all the classics that exist, like this one doesn't outrank the others. So I have it as a 7. Do love the movie though.
Yeah, and I think, Walt, I'll jump on that with you, is that I think there's an element of classicness of like, do you just love the movie? And I think for me that is full bore, yes, absolutely. I think it's a great movie. But as far as like actually looking at it more objectively, like, so if we take that from like, I really enjoy this movie being like a 10, down to, is it something that you've seen before? Is it something that you've experienced before? I think because it's one of dozens, if not scores or hundreds of movies that have this formula. Again, back to the Baja Blast example. My tacos today have Baja Blast, and that's why they're the best. And that, I think, brings it down to kind of the single note there, brings it down to about a 6.5 for me.
I think we're going to have to change the novelty score into the Robb's Baja Blast novelty score.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Since we've kind of individually named certain tests and categorizations, like we have the Kieran test for rewatchability coming up. Yeah, I think we can rename that for Robb. Either that or his taco execution points, something like that. We can workshop it. Yeah. All right, Dad, did you have a Baja Blast with this one?
No, I didn't, because I'm not a big fan of Baja Blast the one time I tried it, but okay.
And here you are objectively wrong, Mr. Lawyer Man.
I've never tried
That's
it,
fine.
so, there's that.
You haven't lived.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised. I'm not a Mountain Dew drinker, but the Baja Blast, they're nice. They're nice.
Thank you, Walt.
Yeah, I think I haven't tried it because I don't care for Mountain Dew or really soda anymore.
All right, so I'm going to admit something.
Ooh.
I do the rubric either the day before we record or early in the morning of the day we record. And what tends to happen is I put down my first reaction, and then after I sit and kind of stew on it or ruminate on the issue, I'll change. And it alters from what I have written down ultimately to what I say. I'm going to go just the opposite of everybody else, which is I had a much lower score, and I'm going to give it a much higher score now because from a classic standpoint, we have a sleazy lawyer who's self-motivated and who ends up screwing everybody over and causing all of this because he gets too greedy. There's a stereotype if ever there was one, but still classic in and of itself. We have a broadcast. We have some good acting overall. There's nothing that really, I have to say, is a problem in this film. We have a very strong female character or characters in both Dakota Fanning's and I'm drawing a blank as to the
Radha.
actress's name that was the mother.
Rada.
Yeah.
Rada.
Ronny
Okay.
Mitchell.
So I think actually the casting was good. The level of classicness that I have the biggest problem with is it evolved so fucking slowly. I mean, once we got about 30 minutes into the film, yeah, it was good. The first 30 minutes, I'm going, why am I watching this? I mean, it's just moving so slowly.
I will say that normally we talk about these types of things in more a rewatchability standpoint than in classicness per se. But I'm going to let you continue because I had some of the same notes. An action film should not be 2.5 hours.
Well, and that's the point I'm making here with classicness is, are we talking about this in comparison to other action films and in the overall way it's presented, packaged, how it's cast, all of those aspects. And so I originally had this as a 6.5. I'm actually going to go up to a 7.5 as far as classicness for the reasons I've indicated, which I think in retrospect, I have more appreciation for some of the things that were done. It would have been even higher if this would have been a little tighter.
I'm curious about y'all's thoughts, because as I was watching it just now, well, one, I think having seen it just earlier on when it was filmed during like that certain era, I think it's a difference. So there's more nostalgia with mine, but also I look at it this time as like almost like a Western in a sense versus just a straight up action movie, and I think that kind of plays into like the length of, instead of just getting straight into it, it's like that slow build.
That's a good point because Westerns do that.
No, I can definitely understand your point because I think Westerns to a degree are the original action film.
Mm-hmm.
And this, given the setting and where it was made, also contributes to that. But, I don't think there are tight Westerns yet that can get in and out of the plot fairly quickly and go from scene to scene to scene. I know Rio Bravo, which is one of my more favorite Westerns, takes, a good 2+ hours. But even then, I don't really feel like there are a couple of slow moments in that one, but it's not nearly to the level where he's in the hospital for like a good 25 minutes of this movie. Your protagonist, who is supposed to be seeking revenge, should not be in the hospital being stood over by reporters and policemen for 25 minutes. Why? Like, fast forward, get us to him seeking revenge and blowing off guys' fingers. Like, that's what we wanted. That's what we paid to see. And the fact that we only have like an hour of him going apeshit on everybody, maybe not even, I think is kind of disheartening for a 2.5 hour movie. Only 40% of what's actually in there is what you paid to see. That ultimately brings us to a 7.13. We have yet to have a average that has anything but ending in 3.
Good. Let's keep it that way.
Might alter my numbers a little bit to keep the
Yeah, well, Walt's over here just like crossing off a 6, putting a 7 in.
Okay. Rewatchability. Now, our Kieran test, which I don't think either of you gentlemen have been on since Kieran got introduced to our show. I think this is, well, Rob, actually, you might have been by the time you were on here for our Dark Knight test. But we've been more recently doing a divided category. One being, what is your likelihood to put this on of your own volition? As you've mentioned that you have put this on at least yearly. So I would think that it would score a little bit higher in that 5 for you. And then once it's on, so this is based on, like if you were flipping around on cable, or I guess since there are new streaming services experimenting with channels, as was released this week, where like Disney Plus is going to have a Star Wars channel and an MCU channel. And so you can flip around and just find something on. So again, we're moving back towards the cable model. What is the likelihood, if this just happened to find its way on, that you would finish it or sit straight through it? So for me, I have almost no interest in ever watching this movie again.
Oh, that's so funny.
I have a 1 for that. And my likelihood to have finished the film, it depends on where in the film you go. If it's for like the last hour, I'd be like, yeah, I can finish this. I mean, it's Denzel going ape shit. But I would much rather put on Inside Man or Training Day or even Crimson Tide more than I would put on necessarily this film. So I have a 3 for rewatchability.
All right.
I know, stunned silence.
No, I'm basically the opposite of you, because like coming in the middle of it being, oh shit, Man on Fire, yeah, I love that movie. And I think the finishing part, if it was the beginning, if it was the last 5 minutes, whatever, I'd probably still sit there and watch it. That would have to mean I'd have to watch channelized TV and things like that, where something would be, not started by me. But yeah, I mean, and I've done that in the past where it's like, oh shit, it's Man on Fire. All right, let's watch this. And yeah, polish it right up. And it's I'm not going to give it a 10. I think I'm going to give it like an 8.5, because it's not like, this is not like an S tier or a tier 1 movie for me and my wife. It's like a tier 2. So that means we have to get like 300 out of the way. John Wick, the Dark Knight trilogy. Like it's not top shelf, but it's like ordering. I won't say Jim Beam, because Jim Beam's disgusting, but like
Johnny Walker.
Yeah, that stuff tastes like shit too. I had to dump 2 bottles of red down.
Not only is it bad, it's
awful.
bad scotch.
Yes. I dumped 2 handles down the drain not too long ago, Dana. My parents cleaned out their house and they had 2 handles of Johnny Red. It tasted disgusting. Anyway.
Yeah.
But
Johnny Walker Blue, yeah, that's
fair. That's a different creature.
I even enjoy black. And when I was in college, I enjoyed red.
There was a certain bottle, I forgot what it was called. There's a specific Jim Beam that I had actually was kind of nice, and it wasn't as common.
Is it Devil's Cut?
Devil's Cut's good.
Devil's Cut's incredible.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it was that one, but I feel like they discontinued it or something like that.
It was Jim Beam All D.
Back to the Aldi thing. It took him a second to get that. That's good. I don't think I've ever heard you laugh that loud, man.
Oh, that caught me. I was like, oh, I don't think it was that. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so I said 8.5. So next up.
Oh man. Okay, so initially I had a 10 to 10, because I honestly, while it's like, I wouldn't say it's the best or the most classic, but every time I watch it, I enjoy it. And I think I could watch it more than I could watch some other movies I love or would rate higher. But when I'm thinking about like getting through it all, especially from that channel perspective, probably not, just because of the length and everything. So I'm not too far. I'm going to put it at a 9.
Dead?
Am I going to go out of my way to put this on? No. I would much rather watch Denzel as an equalizer. Less violent. I have a lot of problems with this guy because he's supposed to be a CIA assassin, and he seems to get himself caught in stupid shit that gets himself shot repeatedly. You'd think he'd be a little smarter than that. Whereas, like in The Equalizer, he's much more savvy and knows what's going on and picks out the situations, and it's obvious that his training and experience is significantly impactful on the circumstances and situations involved. To that extent, that cuts down on my rewatchability. Is this film coming on, or am I turning it on towards the first half? Then I'm turning it off or going on to something else like, I don't know, a baseball game or whatever. If it's the back half...
Wait. Hold on. So your improvement upon something long and slow is to watch
from the
baseball?
1880s? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I did that on purpose.
Sure.
I did that on purpose.
Sorry, Kieran.
because at least if it's long and slow and it's baseball, I don't know the outcome.
Yeah, this was a bit cliche. You knew that she was still alive. You knew that he
Yes.
was going to somehow rescue her. I mean, that was all coming.
Back half of the movie, I'm likely to leave it on. It's going to be something that I would, if somebody asks and I want, to put it on or we're talking about, I'll sit and watch it again. So I went just outside my normal in the realm of rewatchable films and went with a 5.5.
Tom got another weird number.
His calculator's probably smoking by now.
Well, we have been very intimate tonight. So we have an 8.67 average on that one. For audience score, we had an 83% for Google users, an 89% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.6. So to repeat the categories, we had a 6.13 for legacy, a 6.63 for impact and significance, a 6.13 for novelty, a 7.13 for classicness, and an 8.67 for rewatchability. Add in the 8.6 from audience score, giving us a final total of 43.29, and currently placing it on our list at number 137 between Ocean's 13 and The Fugitive. Stunned silence from Robb again.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really great company. Fugitive's not a bad movie.
I love Ocean's 13.
Yeah.
I've only ever seen 11.
I have it number 2 behind Ocean's 11 in that trilogy.
Hmm.
We'll have to see what the Ocean's 14 is.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're supposedly coming back and they have a new idea, but Soderbergh's not doing it, so I don't have high hopes.
Mm-hmm.
He created all the class and flair of those movies, and his non-presence, I just...
There's going to be so many of the characters that aren't going to be there because obviously Carl Reiner's dead and Bernie Mac is dead.
Oh, that's right, Bernie Mac
I think
is
they
dead.
should leave that alone. But...
And Drippy Dwarf got into a contract dispute.
He's referring to the fact when he was a kid, I asked him how many dwarfs were in Snow White. And he said 9. I said, well, there actually were
7
10.
dead.
Or
7.
7. I said there was actually 8 because one of the dwarves was Drippy and he got into a contract dispute with Walt Disney. And so they wrote him out. And so, of course, he believes this and he's telling everybody about the 8th dwarf.
Yes, another example in how never trust your father when you're a young man.
Yeah, when you're like 9, yeah.
He takes advantage of you in so many ways. If you disagree with any of our scores, and I know that there are people that love this movie, that if you're listening to this and probably have some personal things to say to me in particular, you can write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com or find us on any of our socials, YouTube, Letterboxd, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, etc., at Gmote Podcast, or the social media service currently known as X. Anyway, remaining questions for this one. What the fuck is Samuel Ramos's job? Like, he's going all over, they're traveling to places. Like, is he a diplomat? But then why is he poor? Why do they have very little money to hire Creasy, but they want to protect their daughter? Like, why would they be the target of somebody if they're not actually wealthy? But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Maybe he's just so over leveraged and like he's I don't know. And I don't want to do something that's stereotypical, like, oh, he's a drug lord necessarily, but like, I recall the scene where he's like, my father, I inherited all his debts. And that's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you inherited his debts, debt, at least in the United States, is dischargeable upon death for the most part, right, Dana?
Not if it's held by the company.
Right, not if it's held by the company, but personal debt is dischargeable upon death.
That's kind of what I assumed is that there was this business that was perceived as being very big and
right,
plush and, all. And then once you get in and look at the books, kind of like, I don't know, a particular real estate empire based out of New York and Florida.
Well, about to have all of its assets in New York seized.
Yeah.
But yeah, so see, I always thought that Ramos's business was illegitimate in this case. Of the business is him, very much in like the way like a sole member LLC is. That's what my company is right now. It's gonna be changing at some point in time. But like all the money that my company makes right now is technically my money, if you will, and that's not like bragging or anything like that. It's just a statement of how this thing is set up in this case. And it's, if you look at the income statements, it's like, Rob, you made, X number of thousands of dollars last year. It's like, no, I didn't. That's what the company made, but the company and I are the same entity right now, basically. And I'm wondering if with him, depending on what he did for a living, if it was something that was drug trade or something like that, if he and the company are one and the same, because there is not the separation of assets, because it's not a legit business.
But because it's in Mexico, I think you can possibly underscore some of that. Do they have the same debt?
That's a good question.
Law?
He was a car manufacturer, and it was like an issue with like him losing business and trying to get new business.
I don't remember there being anything in the car manufacturing, but
it was very briefly. I forgot who had. It wasn't like a conversation he had. It was like it might have been that one Interpol talking about it or telling someone about it.
Transportation alone would have made it, because this is about the time where all the automakers were putting plants just over the border so that they could take advantage of the fact that they paid a tenth of what they were paying union workers in the United States to produce or manufacture cars. And then they just have to ship them over the border. He could very well have been in some sort of shipping business where it's trucking or some sort of a railroad, but there weren't even that many railroads. It's probably looking at trucking or something like that would have been a potential, but I don't think it matters that much. I think the fact is it was more or less a MacGuffin to establish that he had some credibility and just didn't have any money to support the
lavish
circumstances.
Yeah.
So this is the one that really confounds me. Who killed Kelfus?
Ramos. Samuel Ramos admitted he killed him.
He did?
Right in the end of the film. Right before he shot himself. He talks about how he betrayed him, he sold him out, he lied to me, so I killed him. He says it right in the film.
Okay, then I completely missed that. Because otherwise, nobody else makes sense. The voice over the phone wouldn't have gone after him because he wouldn't have necessarily known he was involved. And I didn't think that Ramos would necessarily go after him. And if there was somebody after Kelfus, wouldn't they naturally go after Ramos too, which didn't happen. He kills himself. So, okay, I guess that is a question answered, but I completely missed that then.
I mean, it is a quiet part of the movie too. I mean, there's not a lot happening on screen there necessarily, but like you're focused in on Creasy's going to kill this guy, or make him kill himself, rather, I should say. So I can see how that would be missed.
Why did the Sanchez's keep Peta around?
Good business.
They made one comment that she is still worth something, and that was, but okay, are you selling her into some type of slavery? Is she going to be a sex worker? I mean,
that would be my guess. That would be
human trafficking. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be sex trafficking.
I was surprised
Unfortunately.
it was still accessible. Like I would have thought she'd be gone, lost in the world by then. But
yeah, that's a good point, Walt. Of like scumbags usually don't like to hold on to product, if you will, not to dehumanize people.
Well, and that makes me wonder, like, what's the time frame of this movie? That doesn't really get revealed. There's talking about at one point that he would need to stay in the hospital for a month, but then they're also insinuating that he's leaving early and that he might bleed out on the floor. But he's able to put a bomb up a guy's ass with almost no problems, and he's doing all of this other stuff only to expire probably, a day and a half later? So he shouldn't have been in and out of the hospital, but then he is, and I don't know. The time frame of this is kind of wonky.
Yeah, I know when he was like, I want to say he was unconscious for 2 days, but I'm not confident on that.
Okay, in the final sequence, when he's on the bridge and they have the laser target on him, why do they let him get closer? On the off chance that he has a gun, why let him get anywhere close to you when you've seen what damage he can do? shoot the bastard. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
I think, well, think of who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with somebody who's trained to assess a threat at a distance. You're not dealing with somebody who's familiar with things like the Tooler drill, which is, people would know as the 20-foot rule of somebody who has a knife weapon that you can't draw a pistol on them and things like that in time. You're dealing with a bunch of guys who run around with AK-47s and other things the U.S. government has graciously provided them, accidentally perhaps, or maybe purposefully. They don't know. They just want to see him suffer, and I think that's why they keep him alive. Is in this case, is they're going to go take him back to their safe house later, and they're going to have their fun with him, but they don't realize he's mortally wounded.
My last open-ended question. Why is there a journalist involved in all of this essentially modern Western-like street justice? I don't understand her role. I don't understand the state government's role in allowing him to do this exactly without necessarily getting in the way. And then they're directly involved by the end of it in some way. That part just doesn't necessarily make any sense to me.
I was confused about how they lost track of him. When he went back inside after the phone call, oh, we lost him. We know where he went. But I'm like, how? You know what building he's in. But
in the US, I could believe that no one would be able to lose him because you'd have a satellite tracking his ass. But in Mexico, I can fully believe that you could blend in just about anywhere and not have too much of an issue because their sophistication and equipment, especially in 2004, was not high.
Yeah, I suppose you'd have to probably retask a satellite to follow somebody in that case because the infrastructure just isn't there at that point in time.
And retasking a satellite to follow a guy who is blowing away known kidnappers and drug dealers,
gangsters,
is not necessarily something. The only time that it would have been necessary is when he took on a cop. But other than that, I also want to know, who is the arms dealer that you're contacting or have good connections with that can just sell you an RPG out of the back of his house?
I know a guy down the street. What are you talking about?
You don't know the same arms dealers I do.
Right? Exactly, man. It's my buddy Andre.
Three of them, yeah.
It's got his phone on speed dial.
Right. What do you need? But no, it was Christopher Walken's character. Remember, he was like, what do you need? We talking about war. It's like, exactly. It's exactly what I'm talking about. That was a good quotable, too.
That is a good quotable.
Remaining questions for anyone else?
I have one. Considering the circumstances and the fact that he was trying to kill, why would he just get into the car and drive away with him when he knows he's going to be dead? Wouldn't Creasy have thought about the possibility of his own explosive enema and just taking out all of them at the same time, since he knew he was going to die one way or the other?
It's a quick way to go.
Yeah, I was curious about that in the ending. That's it. Nothing.
And it's a weird way to end an action film where you're like, he expired on such and such a date. So it looks like it's based on a true story type of thing.
Yeah.
When you know it's not. And then you flash forward and the same guy met his own demise at this time and place on the same day. I don't know. It was an odd way to end it. Well, I think that takes care of the main portion of the episode. So, final thoughts for anyone for the week.
Shout out to Denzel.
Well, I attended the Beloit International Film Festival the last weekend of it, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saw several films that I enjoyed that I think are going to be finding their way onto various outlets, streaming services.
Oh, cool.
On demand. I really enjoyed a couple of films. Happy Songs About Unhappy Things, where the creator, director, writer, star had been a suicide survivor and was talking about mental health. It was enjoyable as far as the subject matter, to realize that there are things that can be done and things that people should be doing to help others in their lives get through dark moments. Also an interesting film at the same time, Jailhouse to Millhouse, which is the story of an actress by the name of Pamela Hayden, who had a very rough childhood or adolescence, which include reform school and juvenile prison, went on to become the voice of Millhouse on
The Simpsons?
The Simpsons.
Like everything's coming up Millhouse?
Yes.
Holy shit, that's awesome.
Actually got to see her. She was there in person.
Oh, cool.
And I'm at some point going to reach out. I have been in contact with the film festival. She's trying to get this on to various streaming. I thought about the possibility of having her as a guest at some point tacked on to one of our episodes, if she would be willing to come on. Let's see. Saturday, we did several short films, but I did see another film, You Have No Idea, on Saturday afternoon about a autistic man who his family is trying to get him integrated into the community and the family that supports him. Beautiful film, beautiful story. I really enjoyed it. An Irish film called The Tale of Billy O.C. If you have, and I believe this is now going to be on both Amazon and Apple for rent. If you have a chance to see it, you can, but put the subtitles on, because the Irish brogue at times gets a little difficult to follow, but it is an excellent whodunit with tons of plot twists. You will not see the ultimate ending coming.
And that's only about 80 minutes in case.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Not very long, but it's effective for the 80 minutes it's on.
Yeah, and then on Sunday we saw, again, a group of 5 short slot films. Some of them were ranging from 8 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes. They're well worth watching. It's a good time. I always enjoy it. I grew up in Beloit. I like going back. I see some old friends from high school. I have a good time in general. The films are quality. The fact is that most of the films are now getting recognition and being purchased or being put on streaming services, either as part of the streaming services or pay-per-view or pay on demand or view on demand. But it's a fun time. So, and I enjoyed it tremendously, and I would promote anybody who has some interest in a film festival making the trek to Beloit, Wisconsin. The next film festival will be between April 4th and 11th, I believe, or no, 14th in Beloit in 2025.
Very cool.
So as I mentioned last week at the end of the show, I had the opportunity, being from Madison, Wisconsin myself, and around a fairly recognizable university, the University of Wisconsin, to have a few different opportunities that I wouldn't otherwise. And there is kind of a film appreciation, revival, specialty thing that the university holds, free screenings of very old films, usually in 35 millimeter print. And they held a special Q&A for the holdovers. They did a free showing of that. And I have to say, when the director of that particular movie, Alexander Payne, got up to do his introduction beforehand, he asked how many people had seen the film before. 90% of the audience had not seen the film. So that was their first viewing, which was interesting to watch a lot of people viewing it for the first time. It was my third time watching the film. But the Q&A afterwards, I just have a few things to share. And, you know, if you don't want to know extra material about the movie or you don't care about Alexander Payne movies, you can certainly tune out at this point. You have my permission. But for those that are interested in this stuff, and I know who you are, it was shown in 35 millimeter, even though they originally had bounced the idea, especially because of the way it looks, the graininess, and it's supposed to look like a 1970, 1971 type film. They filmed it in digital, but they restored it for a 35 millimeter print for this particular showing. And for my showing, they included restored versions of trailers for the movies Clute and Zeppelin ahead of time.
Oh, wow.
That were actual film reel trailers. So that was interesting
cool.
to get an extra added on piece of it. Now, he did a Q&A, and some of this stuff interweaves stuff that was available during the Q&A or the stuff that I went personally down to the front after most people had left and tried to talk to him just personally for a few minutes. He says he's just getting started and he has no thoughts of retirement. At which point I asked him, so you don't agree with Quentin Tarantino on his, you need to retire around the age of 60 because you seem to run out of good ideas and good execution. He was very diplomatic in his answer, whether he likes Quentin Tarantino and his films. He says there isn't much that either of them agree on or overlap in taste. I will say
Yeah.
I found him to be extremely self-deprecating. He was constantly dismissing himself. Two of his favorite things that he likes to do in the film production as a director and a known writer and the rest of this, he loves to location scout and he loves the editing of a film. Those are his two favorite things to do on a film, which is, as somebody who edits a lot during their week, boy, I do not share his passion.
Mm-mm. I don't either. I got to go edit some stuff after this too. It's terrible. I don't want to go back, and I know Walt does too. There is something I do want to. I'm sorry, Tom. Let me interrupt.
Go ahead.
There's something I do want to tack on because you guys are talking film festivals, and it's not something I've ever been to, but something that was really neat that I should have spoken up and piped up on this at first was that one of my team at Westport Studios, her partner is a filmmaker. And I can't help but wonder if maybe her film was shown at one of these film festivals you went to at some point in time. But she's also been nominated to show hers at Cannes here in like the next 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, we're super happy for my crew member is Erica, and we're super happy for her and her partner. They're both going to France, and they're going to see this at Cannes, which is just wild. So we're thrilled for her.
Yeah.
That's the movie news I have.
Beloit is no Cannes.
No, of course not.
I'll say that.
But independent films make the routes on small circuits like that, which is so. I don't even know what the film is called because she wouldn't tell us. She's like, I just have to keep this all under wraps because it's going to Cannes. It's like,
yeah,
you go, girl.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the key highlighted points of the discussion of the movie after the fact and the lead up to the Oscars, especially as Paul Giamatti was in the running for Best Actor, was the contact lens that he wore in at least one eye, where it looked like he had two different eyes pointing in different directions. And so that was a big story for most of the Oscar season. He did disclose this. I don't know if this had been disclosed before, but they switched eyes throughout the course of the film. So it jumped from the left to the right and back again, and they do it for the same scene so that it would just throw off the viewer. Now, if you watch closely, and since I was seeing it on a big screen, you can tell when it shifts back and forth and which eye has it. But I just thought that was interesting because now I was actually watching for it for the first time since it had been revealed. And yeah, it's a lot more noticeable, but just an interesting little tidbit. The last thing I'll share here is like you would think most filmmakers nowadays, he appreciates the streamers only to the extent that they're making many of the smaller films that have no opportunity otherwise. But he doesn't like the streamers because your films basically go to die on a service. It gets stuck in a library somewhere and people have a hard time finding it. And so he will never work with them, even though his budgets will suffer as a result. So if you're looking for him in any of his movies, more than likely they will be theatrical releases with A24 or Lionsgate or Focus Films or Searchlight, one of those smaller, I wouldn't say independent, but kind of independent movie producing studios type or smaller movie types.
Not
so
the big corporate.
Just a few little tidbits. I thought it was an exceptional evening.
Cool.
I had the opportunity to take a picture with him, but I am not a big proponent of pictures. One, because I want the memory to just be for me. So I don't need to share that with everyone. And two, I am terribly unphotogenic. So it would not have been necessarily the best decision, even though he has some rather wild hair at times and he constantly is kind of like messing around with it and whatnot. That just was not my thing to necessarily share at that moment. But it was an excellent opportunity to meet him. I thanked him very much for coming to Wisconsin, since a lot of filmmakers would probably overlook this. Apparently, he has a close relationship with the director of the Cinematheque here at the university, and so that's why he came here. But it was a very fun night for me, and I appreciated that very much. So, thank you to both of our guests. I appreciate you very much. Our time, goes back almost 4 years exactly to Podcast Town.
Yes.
And we've all gone on to do a bunch of different cool stuff. But let's start with you, Robb. Where can people find you and what you do?
Oh, you can find me all over LinkedIn usually. I run my own show, B2B Business Class, which is something for folks who are in the B2B space, business to business sales, marketing, and management. And it's a fabulous little tour. Walt was a guest not too long ago. We talk about basically how if you're in the business space, you can grow and become a better salesperson, marketer, or manager. And it's a ton of fun. You can also find us at westportstudiosllc.com. The Westport crew and I, we manage now soon to be, the number keeps going up, 10 customers, 24 shows, soon to be 11 and 26. It's incredible. We manage all those folks' shows for podcasts in the B2B space, and it's been just a wild ride as I try to build a company that is thinking about people first and podcasts as a way to help the world and people live better lives. And I'm trying to run a European style company in America, and that's a bit of a challenge sometimes. So we're real happy just doing what we're doing, and that's where you guys can find me. Again, hit me up on LinkedIn or at westportstudiosllc.com.
And Walt, what's going on in your life?
Yes, I just launched a new show called The Working While Black Show. It's a spinoff of my original podcast, but it's something that I had, the kind of concept kind of premiered while I was in this creator program on LinkedIn. And I've turned it into a podcast. I'm calling it like a career mixtape that shows you different paths for growing in your career, exploring entrepreneurship. So I'm really excited about that. You can find me all the places you find Rob. Also, my social handles on the other platforms is It's the Great Walt. That's ITS the Great Walt. I'm out there, all the places.
And I can vouch for both of the gentlemen, having a multi-year relationship with both of them. Fantastic guests, creators, hosts, all the stuff in the podcast game. They're both more than capable and great friends on top of it. So we appreciated having you two. I know that I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm somewhat speaking for Dana on this one. We both enjoy having you both on anytime you're on. So Walt, will get you over the 5-time mark here pretty soon. Rob, I know that I already told you I have 4 episodes over the next 2 seasons yet coming up with you, but I'll have to share the rest of the schedule with you again. But we look forward to whenever you guys are back.
Yeah, because next time's 10 for me, I think, right?
Oh, nice.
I think so. I think so. I'll have to count it. But yes, then you're in line for the T-shirt.
Yeehaw. I will wear the shit out of that T-shirt. I love T-shirts.
It is a good looking T-shirt.
So that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I have a need to sort the greatest directors of all time. Next week, we take another break in our regular episodes to bring you a very special episode, our Pantheon of Directors. We will be holding a draft to narrow down our list to the top 50 directors, and then we will be slotting them into our 4 tiers of our Gmote pyramid to give you what we think are the greatest movie directors of all time. We are expecting to have a lot of fun, so make sure you are subscribed to this feed to get that episode. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You could also email the show at thenewRonnyDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronny Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.